Hello everyone and welcome back to the EMDR Doctor Podcast. I'm Dr. Caroline Lloyd and this is episode 44. And tonight we are getting a little bit personal. Just recently I have been reminded professionally about the drama triangle. This is a concept about how we view ourselves and our roles in our life and how often in various situations we can become polarized into a rigid and unhelpful role within relationships with others. So the drama triangle was created by David Kaufman in around about 1968, which happens to be the year I was born, so it is an oldie, but a goodie. So if you imagine a triangle with 3 points, and so we'll probably do it that way. So the 2 points at the top, 1 point at the bottom. So the bottom one being the victim, one being the rescuer, and one being the perpetrator. And I'll go into these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but I have to say at various times in my life, I have actually embodied all three of these roles, and I've played out these roles within the drama triangle with other human beings who have either cast me or I have cast myself as the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. So as you imagine, the victim is always at the receiving end of bad stuff. Abuse, financial scams, bad weather, loss, devastation. The perpetrator is usually the one who instigates these bad things. They are at fault. They subjugate or abuse others. They initiate the breakup. They deliver the punishment, that sort of thing. And the rescuer is fairly self-explanatory. They are the one who swoops in to save the day, who others look to fix everything, who always has an answer, who is the problem solver. So they rescue others. Now, these roles are kind of fluid and changeable. They can change in an instant, they can change in an hour, they can change within the relationship very, very quickly. We can swap from one to another within seconds, or sometimes we play one role steadfastly throughout our whole lives. Sometimes we play one role steadfastly within one relationship, and then within another relationship, we play a different role. So they are not fixed unless we make them fixed. But we always have a choice as to whether we play the role or not. Now, as an EMDR therapist, we have powerful tools to help people. We help people solve their difficulties a lot, and there is a great deal of satisfaction and reward in helping. But the temptation as an EMDR therapist is to become the rescuer, the saviour, which can be both heady and rewarding and also hold a heavy responsibility. And the underlying difficulty here is that if we play the rescuer, then our client will be tempted to take on one of the other roles, and it is really a slippery road for them to become the victim. Of course, we understand here that very often terrible things have happened to them. But this doesn't make them a victim. However, if we become the rescuer, kind of all-powerful and swooping in to save the day, then we may inadvertently push them into a victim role, and this is actually robbing them of their power and their agency. So this is something that I particularly need to watch out for, that I am not inadvertently making victims of my clients, not by being the perpetrator, but by being, with all the intended kindness in the world, by being their rescuer. So just in case this isn't difficult enough, if I make them into the victim by being the rescuer, and then I am unable, for whatever reason, to continue rescuing, then things will have to shift, and the danger is that I then become the perpetrator. that in removing my benevolent rescue, that person then feels abandoned and they will shift me into a more mean and nasty role and become the bad guy. And that is not something that I enjoy. So in some romantic relationships, if one person is very wedded to staying a victim, and if another is cast as the rescuer and decides not to rescue anymore, they may become a bit burnt out with the rescue role, or they may just become interested somewhere else, and they decide not to continue on being the rescuer anymore, then the victim may force them into a perpetrator role. Say, for example, if the person within the victim role then repartners with another rescuer, which is actually really common, then it's very tempting for them to cast the ex as the perpetrator rather than what they may well be, which is just a tired rescuer. And this can be really, really hurtful and very confusing to everyone involved. So if this dynamic plays out in a family and a parent is stuck in the victim role, then this will make the kids into either rescuers, where they become parentified and they have too much responsibility for kids to take on the care or the emotional care or the physical care of a parent. So if they decline that role and decide not to caretake their victim parent, then that parent may really sadly demonize that child and make them into a perpetrator, which is really tough on the kid, and that will likely lead to a very big rift and an alienation from the kid, and an alienation of the kids from the parents. So a number of possibilities exist here. So you could have one parent as the perpetrator and one as a rescuer and the child as the victim. Or you could have a parent as the victim and one parent as a rescuer, and then they force the child into the perpetrator role. And then what you get is a black sheep of the family. That child becomes the black sheep of the family. So if they're cast as the perpetrator and they're a teenager, they may well just adapt to that role and, have that classic teenage rebellion and do all the bad stuff. Sorry, that's just my dog shaking. And then you get the teenage rebellion and the drug use and the going off the rails. So you get if that child is a teenager, then you get that classic teenage rebellion, and they really embody that role, and you get the rebellion and the drug use and the teenage pregnancy, and they really go off the rails. And that is really, really sad, because they've been cast in that role by a parent victim and a parent rescuer, and so they become the perpetrator, and there's an alignment against them, which is just really so destructive and really, really sad. So I have to say here that all of these roles, the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer, are all ultimately disempowering and limiting to all the people involved. So what's the alternative? There is another form or another iteration of this drama triangle, which is the empowerment dynamic, which has the options of coach, so coach instead of rescuer, creator instead of victim, and challenger instead of perpetrator. So these are much more creative, positive, and empowering options to embody if people decide to reject those other roles of the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. They are the roles that they may choose to take on: the creator, the challenger, and the coach. And EMDR, I hear you ask? What a great question. So how does this fit with EMDR therapy? Well, firstly, just noticing the dynamics in the room, and that is the responsibility of the therapist. So then in the memories or the targets that we process, very often if we look at them, we will find some of the elements of the drama triangle. So say, for example, I'm processing a memory around a nasty breakup. If there is, say, for example, helplessness about being abandoned, the negative belief may be something like, I'm powerless, I'm helpless, which fits really well into the victim mode of the drama triangle. And processing this memory, working through it using EMDR, may lead to resolution of all the distress, resolution of that target memory, and the end positive cognition, the positive belief may be something like, I have choices now, I survived, which takes me firmly away from the victim mode and into a more free, more empowered creator mode. Or maybe I'm processing a situation where I am continuing to look after and rescue my ex. So I am in rescuer mode and my ex continues to be in victim mode. And if we process that situation or some of those memories involving that dynamic, we process the guilt and the over-responsibility of that situation, I may end up shedding that guilt and being able to lose the rescuer mode and become maybe more into a coach role. So my beliefs will change from something like, I have to be responsible for them, to I'm responsible for my life, they are responsible for theirs, which may change that dynamic to a healthier version where everyone is more empowered. And if I change my role from rescuer to coach, then that gives allowance, gives the victim in that relationship an opportunity to take on a more empowered role. It doesn't mean that they will, but we give them, by releasing them from the triangle, we give them the opportunity to take on a more empowered role. So this is one lens through which to look at relationships and situations, and it can be really helpful and empowering just to ask yourself questions around, what role am I playing in this drama triangle? And what beliefs do I have around other people in my life, and how is that playing out for me? How is that playing out for them? And looking at, considering, opening the door to more empowering ways to relate. If you need help with this, talk to your EMDR therapist and see where the work lies for you. So I will just mention before I go that I have started to put my podcast up on YouTube. So if you want to watch me as well as listen to me, you are welcome to head on over to YouTube. And if you search in YouTube for the EMDR Doctor Podcast, you will find me. And please do feel free to leave a rating or a comment, both on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you're listening to this, or on YouTube if you are watching it. I love to hear your thoughts on my work and your suggestions for my future podcasts. And every rating and every comment does help people find the podcast and helps spread the word about EMDR. So that's coming from my very evangelical rescuer part of me. All right, I hope that's been helpful. I will talk to you again next week. In the meantime, take good care. Bye for now.